Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for joining us again. We're happy to have you for another in our edition of our webinar series. And this morning we have I was telling Shane that we have a very topical topic this morning that everyone is talking about. And people are at, I would say, different levels when it comes on to AI. So we are going to be having a fulsome conversation this morning um, concerning AI. My name is Tamika Small, and I am your moderator for this morning's presentation. Before we begin, I just want to um, let you know that we're joining from different parts of the territory, and we acknowledge that we are made up of Treaty 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10 territories, the gathering land of the indigenous peoples, and the home of the Métis. And we affirm our relationship with the indigenous peoples of this territory as we continue to build on reconciliation in moving forward with our journey together. Just a few housekeeping matters. One is that we do want you to continue to use the chat. This is great for engagement for us. As well, if you do have any further questions throughout the presentation, please put that in the Q&A to register those questions. I hope that you have a pen and paper to take copious notes because I do believe that you are going to be learning a lot from today. As per usual, the webinar is being recorded and you will be able to have access to this a month after, and this will be sent out 1 or 2 days after. Lest I forget, there is a survey that will be sent out immediately after this presentation. Please do take some time to complete the webinar. That survey, it does provide us with valuable insights as to what you want us to attend to. So again, this morning, thank you again for joining us as we look at the topic, getting started with AI in tourism, practical tools for beginners. So over the next hour, we'll explore how today's AI tools can support tourism and hospitality operators in practical, low-risk ways, which will help you save time, strengthen visitor communication, and streamline everyday tasks. Our presenter will walk us through simple prompting techniques to get clearer, more useful results, look at real-world examples for marketing, content drafting, and responding to routine customer inquiries, and discuss how to use AI responsibly by checking for accuracy, watching for biases, and protecting personal and business data. By the end of this session, we do hope that you will have a clear starting point and a few repeatable steps you can use right away in your own organization. Our presenter today is no other than Shane Giroux. He has over 20 years of experience in software development, management, and leadership. As the technology director at Zoo.com, he provides hands-on technical leadership and helps teams build and ship digital products into practical ways with confidence. Shane is also an active leader in helping organizations adapt emerging technologies responsibly, including AI tools that support everyday work, practical application, and implementation, considering governance and long-term sustainability. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And I am going to pass you over into the capable hands of Shane. Shane, it's over to you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to get this shared out. And I presume we can all see that now. So I'm going to get going on this presentation, which was quite fun to put together. So when we started our company back in 1995, We were one of the first businesses in Saskatoon to have an internet connection. We got curious very early on, and we started experimenting before we knew what we were doing. At the time, the internet kind of felt like something for specialists, technical people, or maybe people with extra time to figure it out. A lot of businesses waited, and the ones who got curious early, they didn't start because they had figured it out. They did it because they saw an opportunity to advance their business. And we're standing in a similar moment right now with AI. So what took 3 people to do a task a couple of years ago might only take one today with the help of AI. And the people who get comfortable with AI over the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to have a meaningful advantage over the ones who wait until it feels safe to do so. So you don't have to wait until you feel ready to do this. You just need to start doing it. Now, a lot of people come into sessions like this with a concern about what these tools mean for their work, whether learning to use AI means training something to eventually replace them. And it's a reasonable concern. I won't dismiss it, but what the evidence is actually showing is that the people most at risk from AI are the ones who don't learn to use it effectively. The people who learn to use these tools well, they aren't going to get replaced by AI, but they could get replaced by other people who use AI more effectively. And we're ultimately seeing this actually amidst all the layoffs that we're hearing about in these development industry. We're still seeing a boom in hiring, actually. It's just shifting where the hiring is going. Now, if we think about everything that an organization produces over the course of a year, social content across multiple platforms, email campaigns, time to booking windows, your website copy that needs to stay current, guest communications, follow-ups, handling the same questions day after day, the occasional grant application, that's a huge communication workload. And for many businesses, it lands on one, maybe 2 people who are tasked with not just that, but many other day-to-day duties. And this is exactly the kind of workload where AI tools can make a meaningful difference to get you started on your journey. And I suspect that many of you have already tried some of these tools, and maybe you typed something in, you got back a response, and you thought, it's just not quite right, or it just doesn't get me. It doesn't understand what I want. You maybe spent an hour editing it or into something usable, and maybe you just gave up entirely and said, you know what, AI just isn't for me. And that experience is actually pretty universal. And it's not a sign that the tools aren't useful for your work. It's just a sign that what you put in wasn't quite enough for it to work with. The outputs that we get from these tools are entirely determined by the inputs that we put in. So if we give it a vague prompt, we're going to get a generic answer. If we give it a specific, well-framed prompt, that's going to get us closer to something we can actually review and use. So that gap between what most people try and what's actually possible is what we're going to start addressing today. So I started this off by giving a prompt to a fresh instance of ChatGPT. I wasn't logged into any existing accounts. I was in an incognito window, so it knew absolutely nothing about me. And I gave this prompt that said, write a social post about our lodge. It's a very simple prompt. There's almost no information in there. And if you were to imagine if you asked this of a stranger, what their response might be, they would probably ask you questions. But what did ChatGPT do? It was happy to go, sure. And it output this post below. Now, granted, it did say that, if I told it a bit more, it could tailor the message better, but it had absolutely no problem putting out some generic content with lots of emojis that had no direct connection to my business. So if I were to look at this and go, I can't post this up, AI isn't quite understanding it. That was because I gave it a very simple prompt and I didn't really explain to it what I'm about, what my business is about, or what I need out of it. So we're going to talk about how to get better results out of these tools. We'll touch a little bit on how these tools actually work, which will help us understand why the way we ask it questions matters. And we'll walk through 3 scenarios where businesses such as yours can find real value: generating marketing content, turning institutional knowledge into documentation, and using AI as a strategic thinking partner. So for each one, we're going to build up a prompt. We're going to look at what comes back, and we'll talk through what a good edit looks like. And then by the end, you'll leave with likely one thing that you can try this week and a clear sense of where these tools can fit into your work. And a quick note on us, we are Zoo. We are a digital consultancy. And as I noted, we've been in Saskatoon since 1995, which makes us early witnesses to quite a few technology transitions. Now, we build digital products and experiences, mostly for clients in regulated industries. So think government, healthcare, financial services. Those are all organizations where the stakes of a bad digital decision are quite high. And to that end, we do a lot of work in human-centered design. So working with users to better understand their needs and then solving with technology where appropriate. We don't want to just push technology in where it may not be needed. We want to make sure we're taking focus on the users first. And that background also shapes how we think about using AI. We want to use it practically with clear professional standards and not just chasing the trend. And we're a team of 40 today, but today it's just me with all of you. And I've been in the technology world professionally, as noted, for over 2 decades. My love of computers and software development goes back nearly 40 years at this point. And I don't really recall a more exciting time to be in the technology space than the era that we're in right now. So when people talk about AI, they typically mean the chatbots that have become so predominant. Now, those aren't all that AI is. The world of like true artificial intelligence is vast, very deep. But by and large, when someone says, have you used AI? They're asking about one of these tools. And these 4 tools are going to cover most of what you'll encounter day to day in the wild. ChatGPT, that's the one that most people have already tried. It's the most widely used. The free tier is honestly enough to get started, get your feet wet with AI. Claude is an up and coming one. It's pretty dominantly used in the technology world now, and it's going to start to get a bit more traction in the non-technology space. It performs very well on longer writing tasks and documents, and it's become a really strong alternative for doing more complex work. Gemini is a great option if your team is already in the Google Workspace suite. So the integrations it gives across Gmail, Docs, and Drive is seamless. And they have a tool called Notebook LM, which is a great way to encapsulate project knowledge within one spot. And then Copilot is the Microsoft equivalent. So if you're already in Word, Excel, Teams, or Outlook every day, it's going to meet you there and do the same thing. It's going to be very well integrated. And all of the techniques that we'll cover today work across any of these tools. The goal isn't to find the best one, is to pick one, get comfortable with it, and then build your skills from there. So when you create an account within one of these, use a work email, spend a couple minutes reviewing their privacy settings. These platforms all let you turn off settings that allow your conversations with it to be used to train their new models. It takes a couple minutes, and it matters because if you're a business, you're working with business sensitive material, you want to limit the chance of privacy breaches, turning that setting off will let you be a little bit more confident as you start to use these tools. And a quick mental model of what's actually happening when you use one of these tools, because it might change how you approach them. So these chat tools use what are called large language models, LLMs, to power these conversations. And how LLMs work is that they predict the next most useful word, given everything you've written and everything that they were trained on. So they are extraordinarily good at producing fluent, coherent, contextually appropriate text based on predictions from all the content they've been trained on. So that's important to keep in mind, is that they are predictive, not deterministic. So you can give it the same prompt 10 times and you're going to get 10 slightly different responses. They're not searching the internet in real time. They're not reasoning the way a person reasons yet. And they don't know anything about your business unless you tell them about it. And that fact that they only know what you tell them explains a lot of the frustrating experiences people have with these tools. So keep in mind that AI is predicting words. So when we use the tool, we're going to write up the prompt. We're going to let AI do its analysis and predictions, and it's going to output a response to us. And then we're going to look at that. We're going to review and refine it from there. We're never going to treat AI's output as perfect from the first draft. We're always going to have a human in the loop to review it because humans are the ones that are ultimately accountable for the work that we put out. So this means that LLMs, chatbots, AI tools, they don't verify what they produce. So if you ask for a statistic, a historical claim, maybe even a trail distance, they will generate something that reads as accurate. It may not be. So checking factual content before it goes anywhere public is not optional when you're using these tools. You simply have to do it. The second is that they don't know you. They don't know that your lodge is on treaty land, that your guests are about family over adventure, or that your brand voice is warm and informal. Every one of those things has to come from you. And the more of that context you bring, the better output you're going to get. And the last one that catches people off guard, and is related to the first, is that these tools will fill gaps confidently. When it doesn't know something, it won't say so. It will fill that gap with output that reads with the exact same confidence, whether it's accurate or invented. And that's simply a feature that comes along with how these tools work. So you always have to be on guard. You always have to be ready to review and refine what comes out. And none of this makes the tools less useful. It just means you need to stay in the driver's seat. So the AI drafts, you decide. And that framing is the best way to approach a chatbot because they work fast. They never have a bad day. They never get tired. And they can produce a reasonable starting point for almost any task in under a minute. But they just need clear direction and a review. So you're not removing yourself from the process. You're just shifting where you spend your time. So instead of staring at a blank page, you're going to switch to refining something that already exists. And that's generally a significantly easier place to start with. Blank page, that's kind of the enemy of momentum. A rough draft, even an imperfect one, that's movement that you can then build on and advance your outputs. And before we get into the meat of this, one thing worth establishing, because this will save you a lot of frustration, and it's something I had to learn early on, never argue with the AI. So if you get an output that you really don't like let's say it's not even directionally accurate, it's just completely wrong, and you start telling the tool why it's wrong, trying to correct each little bit line by line, going back and forth with it, just stop. That almost never works. The smarter move is to go back to your original prompt, figure out what was missing or unclear, add those details in, start a fresh conversation. A better input almost always produces a better output than trying to negotiate with a bad one. So if you ever find yourself arguing with the AI, just pause, delete that conversation, rethink your prompting, start fresh with a new one. It's going to go better the next time. Now, there's entire courses on what's called prompt engineering. And we're not going to go that deep today, but for the work most people need to do, three things account for the difference between a frustrating output and a useful one. And that is context, role, and format. So the context is you want to tell it who you are, what you're working with, as much detail as you can give about what you're trying to do and what your business is about. The role is then telling it how to approach the task. So you can tell it to act as a certain type of person or with a certain mindset, and that will shift how it gives its responses. And then the last one is the format. You can tell it what you want the output to look like. So you can tell it, I need 3 posts, or I need a post that's got short content or long content, or I want it to have this style to it. And it will listen to that and it will adjust its output to exactly what you're putting in there as far as your format needs. So the first one is context. And that's honestly is probably the biggest lever that you can pull. The difference between a generic output and something usable is almost always how much of your actual situation you gave the tool. So the more specific you are, the less editing that you're going to do in the end. So if we compare my first prompt to a more specific one, you can see how much more information there is in this second one. I'm detailing where I'm located, what sort of guest that we have, what our value proposition is, what a typical stay is like. This really sets the context for what the tool is going to be able to do. Then if I add in some additional details on a role and I tell it, act as a tourism operator with a specific voice and no corporate sounding language, now I'm telling it how to approach its analysis and predictions. You don't need elaborate instructions for this. A sentence or two is usually enough to steer it away from the default. Warm and informal, that does a lot of real work on how it's going to write that response. And the more specifically you describe the voice, the less you're going to need to sand down that output afterwards. So we've got our context and our role, and we're going to add our format. So in this case, I'm telling it, I want 3 variations, one for Twitter, one for an email, and one for our website. And also noting, include call to action in each post. So if you want options, ask for it. If you need a specific length, say so. If you want a subject line and then followed by body copy, just say that explicitly. The more you specify the shape of your output, the less you're going to need to reshape it yourself. And asking for multiple variations, that's often worth it because it really costs nothing to have it do a couple of examples, and then you'll pick the version you want to refine out of those 2 examples. So the prompt here, it's a large prompt, but it took maybe 60 seconds to write, and it was all living in your head already. And then what comes back still needs editing, but it's just editing at that point. It's refining something that's directionally accurate. You're not rescuing something that missed entirely or having to come up with something from scratch. So it did put out 3 versions, and here's the Twitter one that it gave for me. Now looking at it, and you may not recall what the first one looked like, but this is a little bit more specific. You know, it references our location, a little bit of the value proposition. It's formatted well for a Twitter/X post, but maybe it's not quite right. And so I just want to edit it a little bit. So I'll just come in, I'll do a few little tweaks. I'll make sure that people know we have guides as part of these, and note that, you know, everyone's going to remember this trip. Take out the emojis. You know, maybe that's not my style of communication. And now I've got a post that's ready to go. And it was just much faster than drafting it. And so I can hit this and then just continue kind of moving on with my day. I've already got my Twitter next post done, one thing off the checklist, and now you're kind of rolling. And so that's the pattern that we'll use for all of these scenarios I'm going to walk through here. Prompt, review, and refine. So your output is never going to be your final product. It's just the starting point. So good AI-assisted work looks like a fast first draft, followed by an edit, adjusting for your actual voice, factual details, removing anything that doesn't fit. So that editing, that's still your professional judgment. The tool isn't replacing that. It just means you didn't spend 40 minutes looking at a blank page before you got to the end. And if the output is genuinely wrong, remember, fix the prompt, start fresh. So we'll work on 3 scenarios. Generating marketing content will be the first one up. And I'll give the context for this is, you know, let's say it's 6 weeks before peak season and you need social content for the next month. You want to email your past guests and you want some updated listing copy, but all you have is the afternoon, if that. So that's a lot of effort to come up with that content from start. So let's build ourselves a short prompt and see what AI can produce for us. So we start off, we got to set the context. Now, I don't operate a 4-season canoe outfitter on the Churchill River, but this was actually the context that AI was helping me fill out initially. So we operate a 4-season canoe outfitter. Our guests are paddlers and wilderness seekers traveling all across Canada. So we give it some detail, who we are, who our guests are, what our operation is. If we didn't get this right at the start, it will make assumptions to fill in the gaps. Then we tell it what our role is. We want it to have an understated voice, outdoor focused, that we don't oversell. And the tone should feel like a note from a guide, not a marketing department. So that concept of note from a guide, not a marketing department, that's going to do a lot of work. And it's because it's a very specific instruction to the model. It understands what a guide sounds like versus what a marketing team sounds like. So the more concrete your voice direction, the more distinct of an output that you're going to get that's going to sound like your business. Then I tell it I want an email to my past guests announcing our fall canoe season, a subject line, plus 3 paragraphs, plus a call to action. That's a good specific instruction for it. The model knows what shape to build before it starts predicting its first words. And we didn't ask for a marketing email. We asked for a note that feels like it came from a guide. So that distinction is a the difference between something you might heavily rewrite and something that you're just going to have to lightly edit. So let's see what the AI came back with. And there we have our 3 paragraphs. At the very end, we have a call to action. And this was produced within a second of me hitting enter on the prompt, and out came all this stuff. Now, I want to look at it as an editor first. So I go, okay, if I see here that, we're talking about September and early October, maybe I want the user's mind to wander a bit and not feel constrained that they should only book September, early October. We note the idea that, cozy up by the fire, but there's a fire ban at the moment, so I can't call that out. And finally, we book via phone instead of having an online portal for that, so I have to adjust that. So I'm going to go in, make those few adjustments, just change the specific months to fall, add a note about the air whispering through the trees, a little bit of poetic touch there, and then saying, call us for current availability. So the total editing time on this piece, took me maybe a minute. The prompt itself took 30 seconds or so. So we're looking at being able to produce this content within, under 15 minutes ultimately. And now we're moving forward with the rest of our day. And keep in mind, don't do things like pasting actual guest lists or any personal data into the prompt, even if you have the model turned off from being trained on you. It's just a safer way to make sure any personally identifiable information, keep that out of the prompt. You can be specific on your business, but try not to be specific on the people or your guests. Use the tool to draft the template, send it through your own systems. These tools are never going to send your email for you. They're just going to generate the content. You're going to take that into your trusted private systems to then handle private information. So that was a quick one on generating some social content. The next scenario is about operational documentation. And this one surprises people because it doesn't feel like an AI use case at first, but it might be one of the highest value things you can do with these tools. We at Zoo do this all the time, and it's helped fill documentation gaps that we knew existed, but we just couldn't get to them. So the scenario here is that we want to capture what lives in someone's head. And let's say every spring you onboard 6 seasonal staff, and the same knowledge transfer happens every year, mostly verbally, mostly from memory, and half of it just lives in AI's head. This is a different kind of AI task. So you're not generating content from a brief. You are the subject matter expert, and the tool is helping you organize and document what you already know. So the prompt pattern for this one is, here's what we do, structure it as a guide for someone new. So we'll start with our context. Wilderness Lodge, Northern Saskatchewan. I'm creating an onboarding guide for seasonal front of house staff. Here are my rough notes on how we handle guest arrivals. And I have a note there that just says, paste in your rough notes. And that's 100% accurate that you just paste in very rough notes. It does not have to be polished. Point form works, stream of consciousness, a voice memo transcript. These tools can work with all of that. The key here is to give it raw material rather than asking it to invent an onboarding guide. You're not asking it to write that from scratch. You're asking it to organize what you already know into a useful format. Then we still want to set a role here. So this one does a couple things. It sets the voice, plain, practical, and direct. And then it sets the assumed knowledge level of the reader. We're saying this is going to be someone new to the job, possibly new to professional environments entirely. So the model will adjust the vocabulary, level of detail, and the amount it explains accordingly. Then the last instruction, we say, turn it into a clear step-by-step arrival guide, use plain language, flag any steps where you think I might be missing detail or where a new employee would have questions. That is one of the most useful things you can add to a documentation prompt. You know your operation so well that you skip steps without realizing it. The model will read it as a newcomer would, and it's going to surface gaps that you didn't notice were there. And what's going to come back will be a structured, readable document you can then refine and actually hand to someone else. And that becomes your living document that you can use as a reusable asset. Maybe you update it once a year instead of having to reinvent it every spring. And the same approach can work for, safety briefings, equipment checklists, guest communication guidelines, opening and closing procedures. Any knowledge currently living in one person's head is a candidate for this. So the output that came back was larger than this. I trimmed it for the context of the slide. It flagged a few areas for me to clarify. So maybe I genuinely assumed that staff would just know, where do we record the reservations, or that they were supposed to carry the luggage, or where the canoe gear is supposed to go. They may not. And that's the value of that flagging instruction, that the tool won't just output your checklist. It will also say, hey, I noticed some of these things aren't in there. Do you want to add them? So at this point, the edit is mostly about adding some operational specifics that only I know. The name of the system we use for check-ins, locations of first aid kits, protocol when a guest arrives early. The structure and language are already quite close. So then the edit in this case is just some substance around it. We don't have to rewrite things. So we make a few tweaks. I made up a Reserve-A-Lodge software based on name and date, patent pending, and then just a couple extra tweaks on there where the safety briefing is, location of first aid kits. So this kind of documentation work, it never feels as urgent as things like a social post with a deadline. So it just gets deferred. But the longer we put this off, the more it compounds. Every year, that same informal knowledge transfer, every year, the same risk, it doesn't stick. So AI can dramatically lower the cost of fixing that issue at your business and get you some clear, key, step-by-step instructions that all of your employees can follow to make sure that they all follow the standard that you want to set at your business. Then the last scenario is one that I actually do use a lot here. And it also does surprise people as well, because it doesn't look like any of the content work that we've been doing on those previous two scenarios, but it's using AI as a thinking partner. Now, keep in mind that these tools are trained up on, I don't want to say all of the world's knowledge, but as much of the world's knowledge as they can get. So they actually know a lot. So in this case, we're going to treat it like an on-call consultant. So we're not asking for a document or a draft here. We're actually using AI the way we'd use a knowledgeable colleague or a executive consultant, just someone that we can think something through with, pressure test an idea, and get a second opinion before we commit to it. And it works because these models have such broad exposure to business strategy, pricing frameworks, consumer behavior, market dynamics. They won't know your specific market the way you do, but they can ask useful questions. They can surface angles you hadn't considered, and they'll help you stress test your reasoning before you invest time or money in an idea. So in this case, we're going to say, I'm considering adding a new package. I don't know if the pricing is right or the market is there or what I might be missing. And I only have Tuesday afternoon to try and sort this out. So we start off by setting the context. We give it some good details about what we operate. So we don't just say, I operate a hotel in Capel Valley. We say, I operate a glamping retreat in the Capel Valley. I note that we target small groups and couples, considering a digital detox package, no Wi-Fi, structured offline activities, marketed as a disconnection experience. And I'm thinking of pricing it at a 15% premium over our standard rate. So the more concrete the situation we give it, the more useful response we're going to get. If I just said, I'm thinking about a new package, I'm going to get a vague output. But when I say I'm considering this exact package at this exact price point, we're going to get a genuine analysis out of this. We then want to tell it how to act within this scenario. So we want it to act as a tourism strategy consultant with experience structuring and pricing premium experiential packages. So again, this changes the kind of response you're going to get. Without it, the model might produce a very balanced overview. But with it, you get someone who's going to push on pricing logic, challenge your assumptions, and ask the questions a consultant would ask. Then we tell it that I want to pressure test the idea. I want to know what the strongest arguments for it are. What are the risks that I'm underestimating? And what would it want to know before giving a yes or no answer on this? So I'm not asking for a business plan. I'm just asking for a conversation with it. Arguments, risks, what questions. That framing is going to produce more useful output than just write me a business case, because I'm inviting the pushback. I'm saying, please push back on me, tell me what I'm missing, rather than just being an advocate. If you ask it to make the business case, it would make the strongest business case in favor of what you were asking. But instead, I'm saying, I want to know what I don't know first. These tools, they love to, as I say it, they love to glaze you. They just love to say, you're right. What an amazing idea. They love to agree. But if you tell them you want them to push back on you, they will. And they just need to be told that's how you want them to operate. So out of this prompt, it came back with, again, I've condensed it a little bit for this, but it gave me some really strong arguments for the idea, fitting my core market, monetizing what I have, differentiation regionally. And then it noticed some interesting risks that I maybe hadn't thought of. Now, maybe you would have thought of these and you'll go, well, AI told me something that I already knew, but that's actually a good thing because it shows that you're on the right track in the way that you were thinking of it. And maybe it noted a few things that you hadn't thought of. In this case, it was telling me that, the forced disconnection can actually backfire with some people. They don't like that. And it creates some level of emergency anxiety where they feel, if something bad happens and I can't contact anybody. You're still going to be the decision maker here, but it's going to give you ideas you hadn't thought of. And then it gave me its strategic take on this. It said, market it as the quiet reset, where disconnection is actually part of the experience, not a headline restriction. So we move on to our refinement step, which in this case looks a little bit different because, again, we're just talking to it. We're having a conversation. So I told it that I think it's wrong about that forced disconnection backfiring. I gave it some details about why and said, I agree on the concerns on emergencies. Let's develop a plan. So this scenario is where that never argue rule applies just a little bit differently. In content generation, if the output is wrong, start over. In strategic conversation, disagreement can be productive. The model will update its position when you push back with evidence, and that back and forth is where the thinking happens. It still has a tendency to want to agree with you. So again, always tell it to push back. I've had a conversation where it was pushing back on me. I said, I disagree. I think this is the right way, but please, again, tell me if I'm wrong. And it did tell me that, no, you are wrong on this. Try something else. So I did try something else. And ultimately, the AI was actually right. What it was pushing back on, it was correct in that I did that. So now we're just having a conversation. It comes back to me saying, hey, fair pushback. You may be right. It seems a little silly, but it can feel like you're just talking to a person on the other side. You're just having a chat with someone. So we can keep riffing back and forth on this. If you want, once you're done with this, to go, okay, I've had my strategic discussion. Now I do want to produce the business case. So at that point, you're going to want to start a new conversation. Take your ending point. You can ask it, summarize this conversation where we ended, grab that, start a fresh conversation. That's going to keep things streamlined and avoid any prior decisions we disagreed with from creeping into the outputs. Every conversation has what's known as a context window. And as that's just, the knowledge that's been part of that chat, which you guys have discussed. And as that window grows larger, the chance of poor outputs increases. So it's better to keep many small conversations than to come up with one large conversation. I've had lots of times where I've been going back and forth and it produced something and it said, do this step. And I'll circle back and go, we talked earlier that we weren't going to do that step. And again, those are the points where you realize there's too much context in here. I need to summarize this conversation, move into a fresh one so that we don't have bad decisions polluting our outputs. So those are three scenarios we can work with, but it certainly doesn't end there. Those are just kind of your three buckets of concepts that you can move into with AI, but there's a whole suite more of what we can do. This slide here isn't necessarily just a checklist, but again, trying to bucket things for you to think differently about where AI might apply. So inbox and communication, like already if you use Gmail and I suspect Outlook, you have Gemini or Copilot that are doing things like They're going to summarize an email thread for you, or they're going to, maybe help you draft up a response. They might triage your inbox and say, hey, you want to respond to this one first, maybe this one next. That's a great help in reducing some of your cognitive load of keeping that communication flowing. Research and synthesis, turning, long reports, grant guidelines into very focused briefings. When we're putting out proposals, we receive an RFP. It's got a lot of content in it. We will take that, run it through a model, and tell it, put out a list of things that we need to watch out for when we're doing our response. Give me a checklist to make sure I'm not missing anything. It's great to help you catch those gaps that you might not have noticed otherwise. HR and hiring. So a lot of companies are using AI to screen candidates. That's, a decision whether it makes sense for your business or not. But aside from that aspect, AI can help you draft up job postings. It can build up interview question banks. It can even help you draft up staff policies. So again, that documentation and operational knowledge, AI is a great tool to help you push out some of that content and get your business a bit more stable on that side. Financial and admin, plain language contract summaries. Again, legal speak, it can help you turn that into, well, what am I supposed to do with this? Things like a refund policy, maybe board report narratives. When you're in this area of finance and admin stuff, that's where you have to get your radar up even higher to make sure that you're not just completely trusting what AI says. It might summarize a legal document for you in a way that's incorrect. So always, again, double check, proof things, but it can help summarize and move you forward a little bit faster. And then, yeah, training and knowledge capture. So turning those experienced employees' knowledge into written reference material, it's an amazing thing that we can do. And I think every business, ours included, you have people that maybe they move along and they've got some institutional knowledge that was in their head that didn't get written down. We can do those, real first fast drafts, get someone to talk through things, and it's going to organize that knowledge for us very, very quickly. Now, I talked about, letting AI move you faster. We also have to make sure that we use it well, not just fast. So we've talked about responsible use within these. Check your facts, don't paste guest data, verify things before you publish. So I'm going to touch on a few other points around that just to consolidate those themes. And this isn't about, like a disclaimer about using AI or a legal warning or anything. It's just what professional use of these tools look like. The same way you proofread before sending something or verify a price before quoting a guest, that's just the standard that you hold yourself to, whether AI is part of the process or not. So AI lets you move faster, but the standard doesn't change just because you moved faster. So always, accuracy is your responsibility. The tools produce confident text, whether it's correct or not, that is up to you to find out. So the practical rule here is pretty simple. If you didn't supply a fact in the prompt and a fact was produced in the output, verify it before it goes anywhere. That can include numbers, dates, distances, anything to do with safety, and claims about local history or culture. If you don't know where it came from, you can actually ask it to source itself. Tell it where it got that information from. It will either produce the source, or it may well tell you, I made it up. I've had that happen a few times where it produced something and I said, I don't think that's correct. Can you tell me where you got that? And it literally said, I made it up. So this matters a lot for content that affects guest safety or sets expectations your operation has to meet, but it's the underlying bedrock of how we treat these tools. We are still accountable for what we put out there. Now, bias and culture, often very local. So AI was trained on, again, the internet and lots of broad knowledge. That still has gaps. Your region, your relationships, your community knowledge are not necessarily in the model. So given how much of our province's tourism identity is tied to our Indigenous cultures, land, and history, we want to make sure that we get that right and don't have the LLM predicting text from a culture that doesn't quite match ours. So the AI models, they're trained on large volumes of text. They reflect those biases, misconceptions, and gaps in all of that source material. So when you ask for content that touches on Indigenous tourism experiences, treaty land, or cultural practices, the output may be superficially appropriate, but subtly wrong. It might use language that our communities don't use for themselves. It might flatten the diversity of nations and traditions, or just default to, generic land acknowledgement language that doesn't reflect our specific relationships. So the standard here is the same one you'd apply to any external writer. Review it carefully, involve the right people, and don't let a fast draft substitute for genuine relationships with the communities we represent. The AI can help you draft, but it can't replace your cultural knowledge or community voice. And data privacy is very important. Most of these tools process your input on external servers. And depending on your settings, as I noted, your prompts ideally are not used to train their models. But even when you have that setting turned off, still default to not putting personally identifiable information into these tools. Use AI to build the template, the framework, the draft, populate it with personal data through your own systems, not through the prompting. So that keeps you on the right side of privacy best practices and the trust your guests place in you when they hand over their information. And especially if your organization is subject to any specific privacy obligations, those don't change just because AI is involved. So when in doubt, don't paste it. If it's very important that that information somehow makes it into the prompt, anonymize any of that personally identifiable information. So what can you do after this? The worst outcome from sessions like this is leaving with either a long list of things that you're going to do differently, but you never will because it's too long, or just doing none of them because you have no clear idea on what to do next. So I'll give you just one thing to try. And this may not work for all of you, but you can come up with your own after this as well. But find a piece of writing you produce from memory every season. Something you've rewritten more times than you can count, and just use that as your first experiment. Prompt a draft using that context role format pattern, and then see what comes back. Edit it, notice where it saved you time and where it needed a little bit of work. It may not get it right the first time, but you're training yourself on a skill as well. You're learning how to use these AI tools. So the first few times, it's not going to be right. It's going to be, maybe you've never thrown a football before. The first few times you throw a football, it's not going to go well, but you learn over time how to improve yourself. So one task, pretty low stakes, and a high probability of a result is going to surprise you. And when you go into these tools, the mindset makes a big difference. Always remember that you are the expert. The tool is the drafter. These tools work best when you bring your knowledge, your voice, and your judgment to them. They work poorly when you hand the wheel over and hope for the best. The model doesn't know you, your lake, your guests, your relationship to communities, or what makes your operation worth choosing. What is your value prop? You're going to have to tell it what it is, and it will build on top of that. Do a fast first draft and then a genuine edit every time. Get that draft as the starting point, and then the edit is where those professional standards live. That pattern doesn't really change regardless of the task. It's always about fast first draft. Now we can iterate and refine from there. And the goal ultimately is better output in less time. And it's not perfect output with no effort. So if you're looking for a tool that, removes judgment calls entirely, you're not going to find it with these chatbots. But if you're looking for something that gets you from a blank page to a workable draft in a fraction of the time, that exists today. And that's some of those examples that I've shown you this morning. And ultimately, with all of this work, be curious. The operators who are going to benefit the most from these tools, it's not going to be the ones that are the most technical. It's going to be the ones that are most willing to experiment with the tools, find ways to fit them within their business, find ways to move faster with better outcomes. And that's a wrap on that session. So I do think I've left some time for some questions. So feel free to fire any my way, Tamika.
Awesome. So I was just about to type, do remember to place your questions in the Q&A tab. A timely presentation and a lot of things that we're able to do with AI to optimize your business and to, just to ensure that you get the best out of it. I think I probably would need to start the Q&A and then persons will place their questions in the tab. And I think this is one that is ever so ever so asked amongst people, and as it relates to tourism, how do you see AI to evolving for tourism business over the next few years? How do you see this?
Mhm. Yeah, I think what's happening with a lot of businesses too is that so aside from the chatbot aspect of these tools, there's a lot of ways that we can use AI within custom internal tools that businesses can start building themselves. So we're seeing a lot of new ideas that are coming up, which may have sat on someone's back shelf that said, well, that's going to take us a year to build, a new like a dashboard or a booking tool. And we can find ways to use AI to build a lot of these business workflow efficiently tools so that it's not just you're talking with ChatGPT or Claude, you're going to have one that's specific to your business. And maybe it's about a very niche area of the business. It could be about managing your guest bookings or managing your, I wouldn't say payroll, that's still finance related. And I get nervous on AI with finance. But all these little tools inside your business, it's going to unlock the ability to get your business a lot more efficient with using these. So you can start building new tools with some of the AI coding tools that exist out there. And I think a lot more businesses are going to start exploring that as the cost to produce code gets a bit cheaper. And we'll still need that knowledge base of deciding what the right product is and what you need to build. But I think businesses are going to find ways to escape from some of those larger software as service tools, build some more custom internal tools that properly reflect what their businesses need.
All right, awesome. I think I do have a question in the chat for you. Is that what is the value of apps connected to the chat box? It says that ChatGPT offers many connections options. I'm curious about what you see as the value.
Yeah. So I've used ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini, and they all have, yeah, integrations where you can connect it to, whether it's your Gmail or your Drive, or it can connect out to, Figma for drafting up designs, all kinds of things. And it really helps pull in that context that's needed. So I was using AI to do a kind of a strategic thinking partner concept, and I told it, go look through my Google Drive and see any documents that are related to this. And it pulled up a bunch that I forgot existed. I was able to take those, kind of tweak those up. It really pulls in that extra information that you don't need to feed it. And we've used it for things like task tracking. So we use a tool that's called Jira, and I don't even have to go into that tool anymore. I can just tell Claude, my chatbot, move this task into in progress. I'm working on it, or update this task. It becomes kind of like that personal assistant for you once you're connecting it to all these other tools, because it now understands how to operate on those tools, saving you from having to have, 10 different tabs open with all the tools. You can have that chatbot kind of centralize it and tell it what you need it to do within all those tools. So yeah, those integrations are great. Same thing with data privacy and things like that. But yeah, I definitely think that you level yourself up once you get some of those integrations connected.
Okay. Um, and I have another question for you. It says, where do you see the tools having the greatest value currently versus lower value?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. You know, so we're a software development shop at heart ultimately. And so where we're seeing the tools have the greatest value on our side is that it produces code very fast. And so it used to be that code was a bit of the bottleneck. And now that bottleneck is less. And so where we're seeing our movement go is to that strategic thinking, the product decisions, and not having to worry about, some of you may not know this, but, writing getters and setters and just those small methods. So anything that's very, what's the way, when your time gets bogged down in that aspect versus the strategic, the product thinking, the business decisions, it's amazing at getting that generation out fast. And so that's where we're looking at it, is to produce the generative stuff that kind of took our cognitive load, and then being able to apply our brain power to the products, the decisions, the business ideas that truly matter.
Okay. And I do have another one for you. This one is very important because I know at the beginning you did take the time to lay the foundation in terms of providing the AI tools with information about you or your business. So there's a question, does ChatGPT keep building your persona with every query you give it?
Yeah, so these tools, they all have something called memory that they've been rolling out recently where it will remember between conversations what you have talked about. It used to be that each conversation was a very fresh start. So you can turn that on. Now I'm very much in the Claude area of things, so I know exactly where that setting is. You just tell it, yes, use memory. The downside of that memory aspect is somewhat similar to where I was mentioning that context window idea, where it might remember decisions I didn't agree with or maybe wrong decisions. But what also these tools have is they have areas in their settings where you give it some details. You say, this is my personal information about me and about my business. And it will always remember that. So, I have things in there that says always push back on what I ask for. I tell it, I'm the technology director at Zoo. Here's the way I like to navigate problems. And here's how I do my systems level thinking. That all goes in this one little spot in there. And then, yes, it remembers that every time that you put in a prompt, that it's going to start doing an output and go, oh, right, I'm talking to Shane and he likes this style of output. So it'll tailor it to that. So yes, you won't have to always put in the role or all of the context. You can put some of that in your personal information in your settings.
And this is a follow-up question is, what training preferences can be used to limit the chat responses? It does like to be very helpful and run in many directions if given the opportunity.
Yeah, they sure do love to kind of go off in different areas. And yeah, a lot of it is just about setting the guardrails. We talk about guardrails a lot when we're doing, the code generation aspect of things. We want to tell it, here's how we architect solutions. Here's how we make sure we don't go down the wrong path. And a lot of those guardrails, you can put some of those into your personal settings and tell it, don't do this, don't do that. Those details about what it should not do, that helps narrow its focus in to make sure it doesn't start branching off into the wrong directions. So giving it strong guardrails is also quite important.
All right. Thank you so much, Shane. Someone just said they found this very relatable and useful without becoming overwhelming. But this person is also a dog lover. So I need to pose this question. Is this your dog?
Unfortunately, it is not. I did have a dog similar to that back on the farm when I grew up, but no, I don't think this is anyone's dog from our office actually. We just found this as some stock content.
Okay, not AI generated. Okay.
No, although there were some AI generated images in this presentation.
Okay. All right, there you go. Thank you so much. I'm just checking just to ensure that I have all the questions covered. Thank you so much for the presentation done today. Shane, really enjoyed you going through the presentation. It was a really timely presentation and things that individuals can actually do. And you showed us how to, in terms of making the prompts more relatable and applicable to what we want. And one of the things that I really like that you said is that we are the expert and the AI tool is just a drafter. So let's keep that in mind. And I hope that today, from this presentation, that you have gained more confidence in understanding how to ask better questions, how to draft, refine, I should say refine, review, and then refine your AI content just to ensure that it sounds like you and that it's giving an authentic representation of what you want, and also that we're using it responsibly and thoughtfully in the work that we do. Thank you so much.